So today we're going to have a look at some trial and improvement questions. Now they're always worded the same way. It tells you an equation and where the solution lies. So the first sentence is telling you a solution to the equation x cubed minus 13x equal to 107 lies between 5 and 6. So the important information is my equation and the values it lies between. And then it'll tell you to use a method of trial and improvement to find the solution to one decimal place, and that one decimal place is really important. Now the way I work this out is I draw myself a little table. Okay, so on the end I always have x, so they're the values for x that I'm going to pick. In the middle I always put my equation, so I've got x cubed minus 13x, and I want that to equal 107. And I give myself a little bit of space because there's often long decimal answers. And I'm going to leave the end column blank a minute because that's going to be where I put if my answers are too big or too small. So the first values for x I'm going to try are the ones they give me in the question, okay? I'm going to work out x is 5 and x is 6. And when I say I'm going to use them, what I mean is I'm going to substitute those values into this equation. So the first value I'm going to substitute in is 5. So I've got 5 cubed minus 13 times 5. Now you do need a calculator for this, so I tap that into my calculator, and when I tap that in it comes out as 60. I wanted my answer to be 107, so the answer of 60 is too small, so I write that in my end column, okay, because this is going to help me out in a minute. The next value I try is 6, so instead of replacing x with 5 this time, I'm going to replace my x with 6. So I've got 6 cubed minus 13 times 6, and when I tap that into my calculator I get the answer 138. Now hopefully you can see that is too big because I'm aiming for 107. So what I'm going to do now is take the value that is exactly halfway between 5 and 6, which is 5.5, and that'll tell me how to pick my next set of values. So in place of x here now I'm going to have 5.5 cubed minus 13 into 5.5, and when I tap that into the calculator I get 94.875. Okay, now I'm still aiming for 107, so as you can see that is still too small, so that means now that my answer is somewhere between 5.5 and 6, so I'm going to try 5.6. So when I try 5.6, I replace my x with 5.6. So I've got 5.6 cubed minus 13 times 5.6. And when I tap that into my calculator, I get 102.816. Now, as you can see, I'm getting closer, but I'm still a little bit too small. So I'm just going to go up now to 5.7. So I'm going to replace the x with 5.7. all the way through the equation, and when I do that my answer comes up to 111.093. Now we were aiming for 107, so that is a little bit too big. So what I'm going to do now, if you have a look at my answers, I've got a 5.6 and a 5.7, and you can see that the one is too big and the one is too small. So that means the answer lies between those two. But you've got to prove which one it is. Is it closer to 5.7 or is it closer to 5.6? So the way you do that is you just do one trial halfway in between 5.6 and 5.7. So I try 5.65 and I cube it, and then I subtract 13 times it, okay? And when I do that I get 106.912125. Now that is really close, okay? But it is still a teeny tiny bit too small. So because it's too small, that tells me my answer has to be between 5.65 and 5.7. Now any number between 5.65 and 5.7, when I round that to one decimal place, I will always get the answer 5.7. Okay, so the only reason I do that second decimal place is just to prove whether I'm going up to the 5.7, which if it's too small, too big. You're always looking for that difference. Okay, or whether I'm going to the 5.6. So just looking at another example now. Again, my important parts are my equation, what it lies between, and how many decimal places. Okay, the rest of the question is worded almost identical. So I draw my column. Again, I have x, but this time my equation is 2x cubed minus 3x minus 17, and I want that to equal 0. Again, I leave a bit of a gap so that I've got a little bit more space to write in my long answers. And it tells me it's between 2 and 3, so that tells me my two values to start with. So I put x into 2 first, so I'm putting 2 into 2 cubed minus 3 into 2 minus 17. And when I tap that into my calculator, it comes out as minus 7. Okay, the next value I pick is the 3, so I've got 2 into 3 cubed minus 3 times 3 minus 17. And when I put that in, it's 28, okay? Now, when you're putting these in, one of them should always be too small and the other one should always be too big, okay? And if they're not, you've made a mistake. So quite nicely at the start for me now, my 2 was too small because I was aiming for 0, and my 3 was too big. So again, same process as above. I pick the number halfway between them, so I'm going to pick a 2.5. So now I replace all my x's with 2.5, and then I tap that into my calculator. And when I type in 2.5, I get the answer 6.75. I'm still aiming for 0, so that is still too big. Now that tells me I need my answer to be closer to 2 than it is to 3. So the next number I pick is going to be 2.4. So I've got 2 into 2.4 cubed minus 3 into 2.4 minus 17. And when I tap all of that into my calculator, I get 3.448. Now it's still a little bit too big, but I am getting closer. So I'm going to come down another decimal place now. I'm going to try 2.3. So 2 into 2.3 cubed minus 3 into 2.3 minus 17. I'm going to tap all of that into my calculator. And when I do that, I get the answer 0.434, which is a tiny bit too big, okay, but not really massively too big. So now I'm going to check on 2.2. Now I'm expecting this one to be too small because that is so close. So I put x into 2.2 cubed, so I've got 2 into 2.2, minus 3 into 2.2 minus 17. And when I tap that into my calculator, I get minus 2.304. And I'm right because I was aiming for 0, so that is too small. So now, again, that has shown me my two decimal places that is between, and I've just got to show which one I'm going to pick. So again, in between those two, I have 2.25. So I put in my value for x as 2.25. I cube it and multiply by 2. And then I do the same for the next x in the equation. And when I tap all of that in, I get minus 0.96875. Okay, now that is a teeny tiny bit too small. So this time now, it's telling me my answer is between my 2.25 and my 2.3. So any number between 2.25 and 2.3, when I round that to one decimal place, it will go up to 2.3. So the answer is x is 2.3 to one decimal place.